So, welcome and thank you so much for joining Amy Hunter and I. My name is Deborah Leanne, and at the month of August, we have selected Amy Hunter as our Luminary Leader for the Speaker Series. And I'd like to just tell you a little bit about her so that you can learn a little bit about her background. Amy A. Hunter is the Director of Racial Justice for the YWCA Metro St. Louis, and their mission is all about empowering women and eliminating racism. As Director of Racial Justice for the YWCA, Amy is responsible for ensuring that eliminating racism, part of their mission, their two-pronged mission, is incorporated in all of the organization's internal and external programming. She serves as a representative of the Y in matters that address institutionalized and systemic oppression. She joined the YWCA in 2008, and she has more than 15 years of experience in the corporate sector. She previously worked at Edward Jones in the area of diversity and also has served on the faculty for the Dismantling Racism Institute, a program of the National Conference for Community and Justice. Hunter has also provided strategic direction for organizational development for universities, school districts, and the corporate community. She has published works and is a presenter on issues of race and social justice throughout the United States and Canada. And she doesn't mention, but I'm going to go ahead and do a plug for her. She was recently one of the TEDx Gateway Arch or St. Louis speakers, and she has an amazing video that you can go to YouTube and search, which is called Lucky Zip Codes. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you check it out. Hunter is a native St. Louisan and is currently pursuing her PhD in social justice from the University of Missouri, St. Louis. She has served on several boards and committees throughout the area. Amy's zeal and passion for creating an equitable society is unmatched. She's extremely busy, being engrossed in her quest for equality while loving and being loved by her family. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So since we both were in a few other places before we got here, I just want to invite everyone to take a minute and breathe into this moment so that we can be truly present. I've been so excited and have looked forward to this, and this is actually totally honest. This is a redo since Amy and I had an amazing interview last week and had live participants asking lots of questions, and all to find out that the recording part of it was not set up correctly. My error. So today, as we tune in and are in this moment, I want to make sure that we have let all that go so we can be in total service to our listeners who listen to this recording afterwards. So I would love, Amy, if you would do us a favor and share your story, the arc of your experience, and how you got to where you are now.
So my first job out of college was with the Urban League. Great institution. Very fortunate to be in a position to help people find jobs. So I'm going to say that being of service to others is probably my career path and has worked out well in every job that I've had. I left the Urban League and went into corporate America in human resources, and was started as a recruiter and then promoted to head of diversity for Bank of America. Left Bank of America, which I had regional responsibilities for, to go to Monsanto to have national responsibility, and did university recruiting there, and left Monsanto to go to Edward Jones, which is where I was prior to coming here. But in each one of those positions have had the opportunity to work on strategies around diversifying populations of people. So in lines of business that are underrepresented, or even industries that are underrepresented with women and people of color, every place that I've worked has worked on creating strategies to better enhance the lives of people, particularly people of color and women. So my work here at the YWCA falls right in line with the work that I was doing in corporate space, really to work on strategies within different institutions throughout the community around systemic issues of change that impact the lives of people of color and women. So the YWCA focuses on eliminating racism and empowering women. And oftentimes the intersectionality of race and gender is pretty huge, and usually very interconnected. So when we think about who is most impacted by a law or policy, often women are, and women of color are. And so the work that I do here as Director of Racial Justice is very in line with our mission, but also in line with the needs of the community where we currently live.
Definitely. Thank you so much for all that you do in that. And I know that a sub question that we had from that last time from one of our listeners was, so when you were little, did you know you were going to be a community leader? I mean, they say, were you bossy? Some of the times women that grow up to be in these roles were called that when we were younger. But I'm just curious, when you were little, did you know you were going to grow up and be something like this?
No, I think like young people, I had great opportunities to do lots of different things. So loved being in Girl Scouts and the adventure that holds for you. Probably learned any aggressive sales that I know now because of cookie sales and getting that patch and working towards goals. So I think that was also very helpful. My mom was an early educator and my dad worked in corporate and nonprofit spaces. And so I think I had a smattering of what all of that life looked like, and thought I would be an actuary. And here I am doing diversity work.
An actuary, that's still about measuring metrics, which you do like to look at the stats and the figures. So that's cool.
I do.
Much more heart-based than an actuarial person in my mind. So where and when did you learn how to speak up, using your voice to create change, both in social media and through your TEDx talk and other speaking?
So I grew up in a town that is racially mixed, but in the school system in the public school system that I participated in, had huge racial divides, particularly as it related to college prep, honor, gifted programs. And so in 8th grade, I got to go to a private high school, really to help me understand how systemic racism worked within the educational system, and came away with a very clear acknowledgement that education wasn't equitable for all people, and some people were being encouraged to do things based upon racial identification, and some students were not. So I probably got my first speaking up voice during my high school years, when I noticed that in my public high school that I ultimately graduated from, that our honors classes were predominantly white in a district that was predominantly Black, and that could not be fair. And so a lot of my conversation was asking the question about why that was the way it was, and what could we do to make it more fair, more representative of the school that we were currently in.
That's awesome. So you already even then were aware and in starting to live and walk in these shoes that you're in now. It's amazing. Did you ever fear speaking up and about what you're so passionate about? How did you let your passion override the "I won't be liked" syndrome that many women are fearful of?
So I think it works differently. In my community, being respected is more important than being liked. And so I've really tried to emulate the values of my upbringing and my community, to make sure that I was helping other people, and not in a missionary kind of way, but more in a servant leader type of way. That our passion is wonderful, and our return on investment is also a business case that business leaders can hear. So although diversity is important for kind of moral issues, I think what I've spent most of my time talking about is really the business case around diversity, how much better and smarter we are, but also all the resources that we have when we have a wider net to cast when we are fishing, versus fishing in the same pond to get the same type of fish. So I think, one of the ways that, sexism works is that women are often given language around being creative or instructive, but I really think, if we were being fair, most women and most women leaders that I've seen have been able to be strategic along with being thoughtful and inclusive, and be able to kind of speak to both ands. So both having a passion and a clear direction of where we're going, but also articulating a strategy on how we're going to get there, and then following up with measurement to articulate that too.
Right. And again, this is where the statistics make a big difference. If you can point out that actually having women and a diverse workforce is a money saver, that we're more effective as leaders, and we can go on and on about that, but I have all my stats in a row too on that one. Recently, I watched a video where Oprah was interviewing Christiane Northrup, and they were talking about the importance of morning rituals. I was just curious, since I think it's fascinating to me to hear that women of influence of that nature follow something actually pretty religiously. I'm curious, do you have a morning ritual, and would you share it with us?
I do. I actually wake up pretty early in the morning. I need the quiet time to meditate and just center myself. I also need that time to think about things that went the day before that I'd like to either correct or change in this present day. Sometimes it's to kind of make sure that day is ended successfully, like without regret, and also to prepare for kind of what's coming up that day. So whether it's noticing what I have on my calendar, or thinking thoughtfully about a training module that I'm trying to create, that I really allow myself to just kind of be in the moment. I usually spend a bit of time each day being really grateful and saying out loud the gratitude that I have. And my gratitude starts very simple, from being able to have vision, to walking, to breathing, to just being in my right mind. And so I think that's really vital to how I then perceive what is possible, not just for the remainder of the day, but like just in general in life. And so I think that's probably my most hopeful time of the day, but it's what leads me throughout the day.
Ah, love that. That's beautiful. And it brings in all of it, right? The planning for the day, but also getting in the right mindset for the day. And then also the opening with the gratitude, it kind of opens a portal, which allows those inspired thoughts to come to us on how to handle certain things. In your opinion, why is being a woman and a leader so different from what we're typically taught in business schools?
So I think the labeling is what's different. So in business schools and in young people's lives, often we say leader, and people's mental models are man, right? So noticing that women lead often, often without recognition, and sometimes even the hard work that they've done is often taken up by men who know how to take credit for good work. And so I think it's really important that as women, we uplift each other. And one of the benefits of being here at the YWCA is that Adrienne Bracey, who's our CEO, is a model of leadership every day coming into this space, and that we have lots of women leaders, Stacy Johnson, who leads our Head Start program, and Cindy Milan, and certainly my direct supervisor, Yolanda Nevels, leading the way and being wonderful examples of leaders every day. And so I think what would be wonderful is if we could see more of that, more support for each other, but also more verbal recognition that women are not support. And often during the movement, we've heard women being supportive, and have had to have this conversation of, they are supportive, but they are also leading the way, that this is more than just a good idea. This is actually an implementation of a strategy. And that is what makes a really good leader.
Very good. Thank you. And there's such a wider, I believe, definition of being a woman and a leader than typically what we are taught, which is very much narrow and masculine in nature. It doesn't have to be a man, but it's just masculine in nature, and we're more broader. What would you say are your 3 top talents, natural gifts that you possess that helped you to reach this level of success that you're at right now?
So I often joke that my mom was a nun, and she came out of the convent and married my dad, was the son of a Baptist preacher. But I think one of the ways that set me up for one of the gifts that I think that I bring to an organization and even to a situation is the ability to navigate between spaces. So navigating into very religious worlds as a young person has prepared me to navigate between corporate and nonprofit, between educator and student, between white and Black spaces, that same skill is applied often in the work that I do. And so I think that has been probably the greatest gift I've gotten in my professional career. I think the other one is a sense of humor, which I also would have to credit my family for. Life is stressful. And I think sometimes, especially in a difficult topic like race or racism or sexism, sometimes humor to remind people of their humanity and their goodness, and that, we're going on this journey alone, but it doesn't have to be painful. We can go together and have fun with each other while we are eliminating racism and empowering women, that this could resonate more like falling in love with each other than pulling each other's fingernails out to get to the next stage. And so, so I think humor and laughter is a way to connect people. I would definitely say the third is my love for humanity. I grew up in a very loving community and a very loving family. And I'm usually very convinced that love will be the way, and not in a romantic way, but like in a very human, connected way, that when we are loving each other, we are working on solutions to make each other's lives better and make our community a better place to live in, someplace where we can be really proud.
Love that. And additionally, we tend to develop skills that where we see we might want to learn some additional pieces to add to our toolkit or our medicine bag. And I'm curious, what top 3 skills do you believe you needed to actually add to your already, I think, pretty wide, diverse groups of skill sets? What did you add?
So the first one I actually added was public speaking. So I joined Toastmasters when I was in corporate America because I didn't feel as a math person always able to articulate everything that I was thinking. So I joined a Toastmasters while in corporate space and went all the way through and got better at speaking in public. Because I think one of the ways that sexism really plays out in the lives of women is that we get a lot of messaging that good girls are quiet. And so the practice of really articulating what our thoughts and feelings were, even in the most complex ways, is helpful and useful. So Toastmasters and public speaking was one of the things that I encourage a lot of women to do, particularly that are in public spaces, so that we can not just be heard, but be pretty succinct while we're being heard. The other place I think is compassion. And I don't know if you go to school for that, but understanding that most people come to the situation hurt. What leads us to kind of the next place of clarity and connection is really understanding that we are hurt and sexed, and not in a shameful or blameful way, but in understanding that when we are more empathetic, we are able to hear each other, and we are able to work across lines of different in a way that makes it possible to reimagine what we currently see into something that we actually want. And so I definitely think empathy would be one of the skills that I've honed in on as I listen to people, but also as I lean in and develop strategies for how we can improve the spaces that we're in.
Yes, wonderful. What have been, and you told me that I had open space on this to ask you these questions. So what have been the 2 or 3 biggest insecurities or challenges or struggles that you've had to deal with in your professional life?
Definitely, I think like most women, probably work-life balance has been our running joke. Is if you're at work and you're thinking about home, and if you're at home and you're thinking about work, you're probably pretty balanced. But that's certainly been the place that we have noticed that there have been times when I've been more at work than at home. And as a mom who stayed at home for a couple of years, times when I was at home with my family, that was my priority. But definitely balancing those out. I think when you're have a role that is social responsibility, that work really doesn't ever end. It just changes its form. So now you're working from home versus being in your office. are working in a community on a weekend. Unfortunately, tragedy happens, and it's not always Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And so going to people and responding in a timely manner is important in this work for sure. Also creating the curriculums that we need. So staying very relevant. So not just with the news, but like what young people are doing, what conversations are they having, what language are they using, is also something that I think is really important if we're going to stay connected to one another, as older people, middle-aged people. It'll be really important that we do stay connected to what young people are doing and kind of what's going on in their world and in their lives as well.
So true. So true. And to get over those hurdles, did you have any specific, did you have a support system? Did you have mentors? Did you go to training? What would you suggest in terms of when somebody bumps up against that? I kind of like to think of it as a growing pain, right? Because we're at this way we need to learn and grow in this new area. How did you overcome your issues or your hurdles?
I definitely have a wonderful group of people that I call friends, that support me in a myriad of ways, that have known not just who I am, but the work that I do, and use that in ways to support me. So whether it's checking on me during a Ferguson evening protest, or shuttling a kid from school to home or to wherever they need to go. So I've been incredibly blessed and fortunate to have really good people around me that not just believe in the work that I'm doing, but also can support my children in a way that is really helpful to them too. So they gain some extra aunts and uncles in our fictive kinship way, with a working mom. And so I think that's important. I think it's important that women not only ask for help, but take good care of themselves. We often compare it to the oxygen mask moment on an airplane. And usually when I'm asking women, who would they put the mask on first, themselves or their children? Often their response is the children. And the reason why they keep saying this over again is so that you do yourself first so that you can help your child. And so I think it's really important that we say to women to take good care of yourself, and that we take better care of each other too as women.
And not feeling like we're weak or something's wrong with us if we ask for help. That is so big for women. I don't know what that's about.
Yeah, that reframing could just be around being resourceful.
Good way to
right. So when men help, they're resourceful. So I think saying to women like, you've got lots of support here, and utilize the resources you have. You don't have to do it alone.
Right. Excellent. I know you've had a lot of mentors as well, and I'm curious if there's someone in particular that you would say you attribute a lot of where your confidence, your abilities to get to where you're at now. And the biggest one I think for me is the being seen and heard as kind of the go-to person to talk about what's going on, with our community in Ferguson and so forth. I would love to know, is there somebody that you would say has been your guide or your mentor through this growth?
So I am incredibly fortunate in that I had an amazing mother and an amazing grandmother who was a politician. That I have the first Black female judge for the city of St. Louis is my cousin. That I have other cousins that have done wonderful work, pioneering work as women. So my family would definitely be my first go-to, that there's this level of expectation that you will make a difference in the world in a real way. And so I didn't have to go really far. I could just really look at Christmas dinner and say, I want to be like you. I'd love to be like you, with the women who were sitting at the table. And then in my professional career, certainly my first real huge job came at the helm of Yvonne Sparks and Valerie Patton, who believed in this young African-American woman who wanted to change, the way that we looked in corporate spaces. And so I probably have not thanked them enough for their belief that I could do something, and then their support once I got into that position. And it certainly has led me to the next spaces within my career based upon their leadership. And I had never seen it at Boatman's Bank, which then became Nations Bank, and then Bank of America, we didn't have any Black women leaders in senior positions. And remembering Marquita Wiley, who came as a senior vice president, was like, wow, and I think that's really important, because as we look around at the companies where we are trying to recruit or retain, who we have in those positions sends a message to the other people who would like to aspire to be future leaders. And so if you don't have any women of color in positions of power, what it says to the staff that you currently have, the associates that you currently have, is that they are not welcomed in the C-suites, if you will. So I think it's really important that we have an and conversation. So recruitment and retention and promotion conversations ongoing.
For sure. I guess, I don't know if we've addressed this a little bit, but how do you feel about being considered an inspiration or a pioneer, especially to a lot of the younger women, when it comes to being a leader in our community, for women, and in the social justice leadership world?
Incredibly humble, for sure. I saw somebody the other day that said, they'd watched my TED Talk, and they were using it in their classroom. And I was just very, very humbled, very thankful that, there's something that I've done that could be useful. I don't take any compliments lightly. I take them all very genuinely, and really, really appreciate it. My goal was not to be a leader necessarily, and that sometimes happens. But I think we have lots of female leaders that often don't get the recognition that they deserve. So part of, I think, my task is to also highlight, especially young people that are doing an amazing job leading in their leadership, and that we say it out loud, right? So that we don't say, and they're being supportive of the older women's leadership, but that we say, if it were not for the young women leading, particularly in an instance like Ferguson, that they also inspire people who are older than them, and they also deserve major credit for leading not just this initiative, but this movement going forward. So from the Brittany Farrells to the Alexis Templetons to, the Brittany Packnets, that we highlight the young activist leaders in our community and say out loud they are leaders.
I love that. In fact, thank you, because I think that's what I'll do when I start scheduling into 2016, is to find one of those young women and actually interview them. I would love that. I'll talk to you about that later. The next comment I want to read and just get your take on, it's actually made national news, but the owner of Left Bank Books here in St. Louis had an anonymous note put under the door that after he put Black Lives Matter signs all throughout the front windows of the shop. And having an anonymous letter meant he couldn't address the person directly and have the conversation, which I know would have maybe helped to heal the situations, but he wrote an open letter, which I love. So what it said was, what I wish I could convey, white person to white person, is that Black Lives Matter does not mean that white people are bad. It never did. Saying someone matters does not mean that nobody else matters. It just says to someone who feels invisible, I see you and I value you. And I would love to hear your take on that. And the other piece is, how do you talk to people? Because you do bridge so many different communities of color and whiteness. And how do you talk about this whole Black Lives Matter thing?
Yeah, we have a saying here at the YWCA, more for girls doesn't mean less for boys. And so I think, often we're kind of operating out of a scarcity model where there isn't enough, there isn't enough what? Love. There is enough love for everyone, right? That people are asking for equitable treatment. And so this isn't like the Black Lives Matter movement is saying, what we really want is for you to treat Black people better than you treat white people, which I think is in the articulation, or maybe some of the discomfort in saying Black Lives Matter. But we have this U.S. historical narrative that Black lives haven't mattered, that chattel slavery didn't happen to some of the people in America. It happened to a specific specific group of people in America who are not treated as humans, and that we have the 3/5 rule. We have the 1-drop rule for definition of Blackness in America. And so noticing that we have spent a legacy and a history defining humanity based upon racial identification, the Black Lives Matter movement actually highlights that really for our own beauty and existence as a community, we are going to have to address the ways institutionally and systemically some people have been unjustly targeted and other people have not. And make this a more equitable world. I think the fear in the conversations I've had about the Black Lives Matter signs has been really with white counterparts to ask, what do you think you would lose if this were more equitable? And some of the responses have been special treatment. So if we say Black Lives Matter, and then that means that as a white person, I don't get special treatment and my children don't get special treatment. And that is a giving up kind of feeling, as if we couldn't just, and we've said this before, right? So part of the conversation about having schools that are more equitable, that I've had in the majority white spaces, but then my property values would go down. So if all the schools were good, then I would lose money on my real estate, because part of the reason why I bought this house was to have access to good school. And in my privileged place of heterosexuality, what I would offer is, we have marriage equality now, and I can tell you as a heterosexual woman, I didn't lose anything because other people gained rights. And so what a great example of, it didn't cost me anything. I haven't lost anything. My life didn't dramatically change because of it, other than the fact that now my friends have access to the same rights that I had access to. And that makes me feel good. And so I think when Black Lives Matter, it will make white people feel good too. And that isn't something that people are going to miss out on, and something that we can't ask for, have. But I am encouraged by the conversations that's being encouraged by it. So if nothing else, we're at a different place than we were because of the signs.
Oh, thank God. I agree. I am so curious if you can share, do you have a plan? What's next for you? Will you share it with us?
I don't think I have a direct plan for sure. I mean, I've been really fortunate in that my career has taken paths that I could not have imagined. I was joking with somebody the other day that, right out of college, my goal was to be a recruiter. That happened at 25, so I had to come up with another goal. And so I'm really good about, the universe aligns in the ways that it aligns for us. And so I'm not worried about what's next. Just committed to doing a really good job where I am now, and what will be, will be.
Right. And that's que sera, que sera. So do you have a message that you would like to leave our listeners with? I mean, without having the amazing questions that we had last time and the audience participation this time around on this recording, I'm curious if there's anything else that you would like to share before we close.
I would just really like to encourage women to work across racial lines, particularly around issues of race and gender and violence. And I think they're all really connected. And one of the things that I think is wonderful about being a woman is that we are thoughtful and loving and kind and good and compassionate, that there are many assignments or roles that we share, like mother, sister, daughter, that are very familiar and extend beyond racial categorization. And that if we as women worked across racial lines, and there's some moments in history that we've missed it, right? Like the women's suffrage movement and ERA, that, the events that have unfolded in Ferguson have given us an opportunity to do this different. I am pretty sure that every woman that I've talked to when Ferguson happened, not one woman that I've met said something like, oh, they're protesting, let's go get an armored car. Let's go get an M16 rifle, right? That we as women would think of a situation like that so much differently. And that really the change that I'm interested in looking forward to is going to be at the helm and the leadership of women, because we operate out of more strategy and organization and love and compassion and humanity. Not that men can't, but I think violence is such part of our male socialization that sometimes that's their first go-to. And I think because violence hinders and affects the lives of women because of sexism, I think it isn't part of our go-to. And so I think some of the strategies that will be best strategies will come at the helm of women, and that we can do a better job working across racial lines. That if there was one ask that I would have, is that we reach across racial lines more consistently to create strategies and a better tomorrow for everyone.
In complete agreement with you on that. Thank you. Oh, you know what I didn't do is I didn't even explain that I felt that you are, how I described you in one of the Facebook messages promoting this, is I called you a compassionate activist.
Oh.
Because I feel that activism has got such a negative, it has to be violent and, you know, all of that. Not that some of the violence isn't, I believe, needed to get attention, but there's also the way that when you're speaking with somebody, that I said I've always wanted to go to the Amy Hunter Charm School so that I can create a connection versus this coming from the righteous, can't you see that's wrong or racist or sexist or whatever, which totally turns people off. And you do it in such a way. Could you just model that for just a second? So if I say something like, well, Amy, you know, all lives matter. And how would you like introduce fictive kinship or something in a way that you do so eloquently and calmly and compassionately?
Yeah, I've gotten the all lives matter comment quite a few times, but I think my next question is, you know, usually I remind people of kind of what is obvious, like, you're such a good person. Help me understand why that would be a problem. Help me understand why saying Black Lives Matter is a problem, because I know you and I know you care about people. And so I'm surprised maybe even that would be an issue, right? That would come up for you as a person who would affirm that Black Lives Matter. Why saying it out loud is it, you know, so problematic? Because usually if people are combative or even kind of righteous or indignant, it's really coming from a place of fear. So although rationale might be our first go-to, if we're listening attentively, then really we're listening for what they're afraid of. And the fear is then what we address, maybe not the words all the time, but like maybe where they're really coming from. So I think I'm usually searching for what is preventing us from being connected, because I don't think most people want violence to occur for anyone. And so we should all be on the same side. I'm always like, why is there a side to this? Like, people are saying police are profiling Black people, and why is that a side? Like, don't we all want that to end? Like, what do we have to lose if that does end? Why is that a side? Like, yes, if you had used any other racial group that was being targeted as an African American, I would say that should end, right? So the things that don't necessarily affect my life but affect people that I do love, I would fight for their liberation and for their equity and for their humanity. And so usually I'm listening for something different than maybe the words that are said. I'm listening for the places where people get stuck. So I might appear to be more compassionate because if I understand you're hurt, then I don't poke you, right?
Right.
I work to heal whatever that hurt is.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's very much other oriented. And I feel like when I hear that, I go to a place where I want to be right, which doesn't build bridges. So thank you for teaching me that. I so appreciate what I learned in the Witnessing Whiteness group. So, so on that note, I'd like to close and say happy weekend. And thank you so much for taking your time again for this very special conversation. And if anyone has any comments or questions, I'll have some ways to connect with you. Would you prefer your email through the Y or?
Yes, email through the Y.
Awesome. Okay. Take excellent care, and I will talk to you. I hope I run into you somewhere soon.
I'm sure you will.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Amy.
Bye.